The studio lights glowed overhead, casting a professional polish across the room, but beneath the surface there was something unusually tense in the air. When the name Sandra Bullock came up, Keanu Reeves didn't smile. Instead, he inhaled, deeply, as if revisiting a memory that had never been spoken aloud. The host tried to keep the conversation moving, but Keanu's silence lingered, stretching just long enough to shift the energy in the room. Then, with eyes reflecting something tender and long-buried, he finally spoke. What he revealed next wasn't scripted, and no one, neither the crew, the host, nor the audience was prepared for it. As the applause died down and the central camera focused on the stage, the talk show's logo glowed behind the host, Vanessa Torres, poised and polished, her smile perfectly timed for live television. "Ladies and gentlemen, Keanu Reeves," she announced, her tone crisp and welcoming. The crowd erupted again as Keanu stepped in, dressed in all black, exuding a quiet, graceful presence. A subtle smile crossed his face as he acknowledged the audience and shook Vanessa's hand. They settled into their seats. A pristine coffee table between them, glasses of sparkling water at each side. Everything seemed perfectly in place. Vanessa opened with the usual line of questioning Keanu's new film, the action sequences, a few funny behind-the-scenes anecdotes. He answered in his typical calm manner, slightly introspective, yet warm and attentive. The audience responded with light laughter and quiet admiration, but the tone began to shift when Vanessa casually flipped a card and brought up a subject everyone was curious about. "Speaking of on-screen chemistry," she said with a grin, "let's talk about Speed Sandra Bullock and you. What a duo." The room chuckled, anticipating a light-hearted answer, but Keanu didn't laugh. His smile faded and his gaze wandered into the distance. It was only a moment, but it was enough to quiet the room. Vanessa noticed it instantly. She was far too experienced not to sense the change in atmosphere. "Keanu?" she asked, her voice softening. "Are you okay?" He adjusted. In his chair, his eyes still distant. "Yeah. It's just—" He paused, and a faint smile touched his lips, but it wasn't playful. It carried the weight of something unspoken. "I think maybe today is the day I tell a story I've never shared before. Not publicly, anyway." For a beat, even. The production crew seemed to hold their breath. Vanessa leaned in, unsure of what was coming, but wise enough to let it unfold naturally. "People always talk about the chemistry Sandra and I had on Speed," Keanu began. "And yeah, there was something there. Something more than what we ever acknowledged." He leaned back slightly, his expression softening, but it was never discussed, not between us. Not ever. His voice was steady but tinged with nostalgia. The camera zoomed in, catching the faint lines around his eyes, the quiet tremble of someone exposing a piece of their soul. "Her name, just saying it changed my mood?" "Always did," he admitted, more to himself than to anyone else. Vanessa didn't speak. The audience didn't shift. What they were witnessing was something fragile and genuine. "For a long time. I thought it was all in my head," he continued. "Just a harmless crush, but over the years I realized it might have been more than that." "More?" Vanessa finally asked, her tone a whisper. He nodded. "More real. More lasting. More quiet. The kind of feeling you don't even know how to explain." I never said anything, not to her, not to anyone, until now. Vanessa's eyes widened just slightly, betraying her understanding of the moment's weight. "Why now, Keanu?" He considered that for a while before responding. "Because I think I'm ready. And maybe someone out there needs to hear this, that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we never find the courage to tell." At that moment, the studio transformed. It was no longer a scripted show with pre-planned beats. It had become something sacred, almost confessional. "I had feelings for Sandra," Keanu said, looking out toward the audience. "Real ones, and I never said anything." The room was utterly still. Vanessa, holding her cue cards with a faintly nervous smile, knew that what was unfolding was far beyond an ordinary interview. "What exactly do you mean by that, Keanu?" she asked quietly. He smiled again, the kind that's filled with sweet regret. "I mean, I had a crush on her, a real one from the very beginning. There was a soft gasp in the room, not dramatic or invasive, but respectful. What he'd just admitted didn't feel like celebrity gossip. It felt like the truth. It started on the set of Speed, he went on. We were both young, both trying to stay professional. But in those in-between moments during lighting setups, rehearsals, rides to the set, I started noticing things. Small things. The way she laughed, so naturally. It wasn't forced. She really found joy in everything. He paused, lost in the memory. She had this lightness to her. I remember thinking, how is someone so grounded and still so free? Vanessa offered a gentle smile. And she never knew? He shook his head slowly. No, I never told her. I thought it would complicate things. We had something strong professionally, and I didn't want to ruin that. And honestly, I didn't think she felt the same. There was a long silence. You know, Keanu added, leaning forward slightly, there are people in life you quietly begin to sync with. You pick up on their rhythms, their pauses, their favorite tea, the way they tilt their head when they're thinking. You start noticing everything, and before you know it, you're in deep. Keanu paused, his gaze drifting downward as if he were looking for words buried somewhere deep beneath the floor. For a brief moment, he seemed lost in memory, caught between the woman he had known and the version of her he'd quietly imagined. I don't know if it was love, he said finally, his voice low, almost reluctant, but it was something. Something that stayed with me. The entire room went still, an unspoken reverence hanging heavy in the silence. Vanessa, the interviewer, hesitated as she turned her next card, unsure whether to ask the question printed on it, but she didn't need to. Keanu wasn't finished. There was this day, he began again. We had a break between scenes. We were sitting on some crates eating sandwiches. She was talking about her dog nothing special, but I remember watching her hands move as she spoke. I don't know why, but in that moment, I knew I was in trouble. That I wasn't just admiring her anymore. I was feeling something more. He gave a soft chuckle, the kind that holds more sadness than humor. I kept it to myself, every bit of it. I got really good at pretending it was just friendship. Vanessa's eyes shimmered slightly. That's a kind of heartbreak a lot of people know. Loving someone quietly. Keanu met her gaze. Yeah, and in a world like ours where everything is always public, there's something sacred about the things you never say. They stay untouched. Maybe even more real because no one got the chance to ruin them. She leaned back, absorbing his words. Then, gently, she asked, but if you never told her, how do you know it wasn't mutual? Keanu looked at her, and for a second his eyes held something deeper. Because I wasn't the only one, he said. The room froze. Vanessa blinked, trying to grasp what he'd just revealed. What do you mean? She told someone, Keanu said softly. Not me, but someone else. And Vanessa knew instantly what he meant. A long-buried memory rushed back to her, a quiet moment years ago, backstage at an award show. Sandra had been sipping wine, relaxed and unguarded, when she admitted, almost offhandedly, I had the biggest crush on Keanu during Speed. But I never said anything. Didn't want to ruin what we had. At the time, Vanessa hadn't thought much of it. But now, hearing Keanu say those words, it felt like unlocking a hidden door in a story long unfinished. She leaned toward him. She said it to me once. I didn't think she meant it seriously. Keanu smiled faintly, emotion rising in his voice. I think she did, but she didn't want to risk the friendship. Neither did I, so we just danced around it. Silence crept in again, heavier this time, as if years of unspoken truth had just found their way into the air. I kept it all inside, Keanu murmured again. But I wasn't the only one. Vanessa could hardly breathe. The atmosphere in the studio had changed, not dramatic, not staged, but deeply real. It was the kind of quiet that follows a truth. Everyone suspected, but no one ever confirmed. She asked him gently, do you remember when you first found out? He nodded slowly. It was years later. Someone, an interviewer or producer, maybe said it in passing. You know, Sandra once said she had a crush on you during Speed. I laughed. Thought it was a joke, but it stayed with me. Did. You ever watch the interview? She asked, leaning closer. He chuckled, this time softer. Yeah, I did. Eventually, there she was, Sandra, doing some press interview, sipping coffee, just being herself. And she just said it. Casually, I had a little crush on Keanu, like it didn't mean anything. Vanessa's voice was quiet. But it did? Keanu nodded. It did. I saw her say those words and I just thought, what were we doing? Why did we never talk about it? The audience let out a gentle, knowing laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it hurt. In that universal way, the ache of what could have been. Keanu looked away, then back up. I started thinking about all the times we could have said something. Wrap parties, dinners, late-night phone calls that didn't need to go that long. We had chances, we just never took them. He paused, almost afraid of the truth. I think we were afraid that saying it out loud would ruin what we had. Because what we had, it wasn't just flirtation, it was something deeper. Vanessa nodded slowly. It's hard. Living with the what? Ifs. Keanu smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both peace and regret. Yeah, but with time I've learned, what ifs only hurt when you think the story is over. Maybe some feelings never really go away, maybe they just shift. He went quiet again, then added, there was this premiere years after. Speed, we hadn't seen each other in a long time. But when we hugged, talked, it felt like nothing had changed. No awkwardness. Just the same ease. As she walked away, I remember thinking this will always feel like home. Even if I never live here. Vanessa whispered, I think a lot of people want Jack and Annie to end up together in real life. Keanu looked at her and smiled. They weren't really characters. I mean, yeah, we were acting, but Jack and Annie, that was just us without the fear. She flipped another cue card but didn't read from it. Instead, she asked softly, do you think you missed your chance? Keanu dropped his eyes, then lifted them again. Yes and no. Some chances are meant to be missed, so they stay perfect. He exhaled. But yeah, there were nights I'd lie awake and think, what if we had just said something? What if we'd been a little braver? What do you think would have happened? She asked, her voice barely audible now. He didn't smile this time. I think everything would have changed. For better or worse, I don't know, but it would have changed. And maybe we weren't ready for that. Maybe the timing just wasn't right. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. Do you believe in timing? He nodded. Absolutely. It's everything, and it can be cruel. Because sometimes the right people meet at the wrong time. The studio fell silent again, not out of awkwardness, but out of respect for everything. That had been left unsaid for so many years. Keanu's voice dropped to a near whisper. I don't regret what we didn't say. I think we were protecting something rare. And just because it didn't become love, doesn't mean it wasn't love. He let out a breath. Timing is a funny thing, he said. But just as Vanessa was about to pivot the conversation, Keanu looked up and added something quietly, something that made her pause. Because what happened next changed everything we thought we knew about each other. Done. Yeah, version. Clean paragraph form, high 100%, original rewrite, no timestamps, no copyright issue, voiceover plus visual ready fits perfectly with emotional celebrity style. Faceless channel agar chaho to thumbnail ka third prompt, ya isk lai title b, suggest car done. Batao Brodgar asked ChatGPT. Keanu paused, his gaze drifting downward as if he were looking for words buried somewhere deep beneath the floor. For a brief moment, he seemed lost in memory, caught between the woman he had known and the version of her he'd quietly imagined. I don't know if it was love, he said finally, his voice low, almost reluctant. But it was something that stayed with me? The entire room went still, an unspoken reverence hanging heavy in the silence. Vanessa, the interviewer, hesitated as she turned her next card, unsure whether to ask the question printed on it. But she didn't need to. Keanu wasn't finished. There was this day, he began again. We had a break between scenes. We were sitting on some crates eating sandwiches. She was talking about her dog nothing special, but I remember watching her hands move as she spoke. I don't know why, but in that moment, I knew I was in trouble. That I wasn't just admiring her anymore. I was feeling something more. He gave a soft chuckle, the kind that holds more sadness than humor. I kept it to myself, every bit of it. I got really good at pretending it was just friendship. Vanessa's eyes shimmered slightly. That's a kind of heartbreak a lot of people know. Loving someone quietly. Keanu met her gaze. Yeah, and in a world like ours where everything is always public, there's something sacred about the things you never say they stay untouched. Maybe even more real because no one got the chance to ruin them. She leaned back, absorbing his words. Then, gently, she asked, "But if you never told her, how do you know it wasn't mutual?" Keanu looked at her, and for a second his eyes held something deeper. "Because I wasn't the only one," he said. The room froze. Vanessa blinked, trying to grasp what he'd just revealed. "What do you mean?" she told someone, Keanu said softly. "Not me, but someone else." And Vanessa knew instantly what he meant. A long-buried memory rushed back to her, a quiet moment years ago, backstage at an award show. Sandra had been sipping wine, relaxed and unguarded, when she admitted, almost offhandedly, "I had the biggest crush on Keanu during Speed. But I never said anything. Didn't want to ruin what we had." At the time, Vanessa hadn't thought much of it. But now, hearing Keanu say those words, it felt like unlocking a hidden door in a story long unfinished. She leaned toward him. "She said it to me once. I didn't think she meant it seriously." Keanu smiled faintly, emotion rising in his voice. "I think she did, but she didn't want to risk the friendship. Neither did I, so we just danced around it." Silence crept in again, heavier this time, as if years of unspoken truth had just found their way into the air. "I kept it all." Inside, Keanu murmured again, "But I wasn't the only one." Vanessa could hardly breathe. The atmosphere in the studio had changed, not dramatic, not staged, but deeply real. It was the kind of quiet that follows a truth everyone suspected, but no one ever confirmed. She asked him gently, "Do you remember when you first—" Vanessa didn't speak at first. There was something about Keanu's last words that had struck a chord not just with her, but with every single person in the room. Even the cameramen, who were trained to stay focused, looked like they'd momentarily forgotten they were working. Keanu adjusted in his seat, leaning forward ever so slightly. His voice, now softer, carried a quiet weight. It wasn't just a confession anymore, it was a memory unfolding, years past. He began, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the present. We lived our lives, projects, travel, different relationships. We'd bump into each other now and then. And it was always easy, that same familiar ease between us. He paused, but we never spoke about it. "Not once, about what we almost were," Vanessa slowly nodded. "Not even once?" Keanu shook his head. "No, I think we both held on to that silence, not out of fear, but out of respect. For each other, for that one perfect moment we shared. And maybe because neither of us wanted to confront the possibility that we had let something important slip away." He paused, then looked her in the eyes. "But eventually we did talk about it." The room leaned in, the air dense with quiet curiosity. "It was years later," he said. "After a charity event in LA, we ended up having a drink together, just the two of us. It wasn't planned, maybe that's why it worked." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, her tone curious but warm. "What did you say?" Keanu offered a small smile. "I told her the truth. That I had feelings for her back during the filming of Speed, that I always wondered if she'd felt the same." Vanessa blinked, surprised. "And then?" Keanu's expression softened. She laughed. That same laugh I remembered so clearly, and she said, "Keanu, you know I did." The audience exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath. "She told me she had felt it too, but like me, she buried it, because we were both trying to be good people. Good friends, good professionals. We didn't want to break something we already valued." He leaned back in his chair, the weight of memory in his breath. "We just smiled then, like two people realizing we'd both been reading the same book in silence for 20 years. Vanessa's eyes welled slightly. "Did it hurt?" She asked gently, To know the feeling was mutual ... But that nothing came of it? Keanu looked away for a moment before replying. Yes, he admitted, and ... no. He paused thoughtfully. It was a mix of warmth and ache, but mostly peace. Because by then, we weren't the same people we were on that movie set. We'd lived, lost, grown. Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper. So what happened after that? He looked down, then back up with a steady gaze. We hugged. We thanked each other for being honest. And we agreed we had been exactly what the other needed back then, even if it wasn't meant to last. He paused, then added, It's a rare thing to look someone in the eye and say, I loved you in silence. And I'm okay that it stayed. That way, that kind of acceptance ... takes time. It takes maturity. There was stillness in the room, not of discomfort, but of reverence. Keanu continued, People often assume a story only matters if it ends in a relationship. But that's not always true. Sometimes, the point of a connection isn't to last, it's just to remind you what it feels like to truly feel. Vanessa smiled through a veil of emotion. That's beautiful, she whispered. He nodded. There's a strange kind of joy in knowing we were both brave enough to feel something even if we weren't brave enough to say it back then. We found closure not because it ended, but because we finally understood what it had been. Vanessa leaned in, her voice hushed. And what was it? Keanu answered without hesitation. A kind of love, quiet, respectful, real, and it stayed with both of us. The camera slowly zoomed in on his face, catching the memory in his eyes, but not the sadness. We both found happiness in other places, he added gently. But something she said during that conversation stayed with me for years. Vanessa tilted forward slightly. What did she say? Keanu looked directly into the lens, as if speaking to someone far away. Or maybe to a version of himself. From long ago. Maybe, she said, we were meant to meet for something else entirely. There was a pause, not of emptiness, but of meaning. Vanessa echoed his words quietly. Maybe we were meant to meet for something else entirely. Then, after a beat, what do you think she meant by that? Keanu let the question linger in the air before speaking. I've thought about that moment more times than I can count. Back then, I didn't know, but now, I think she meant we weren't sent to each other for romance. We were sent for something deeper. Something quieter? Presence? Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Presence? He nodded. She showed up in my life at a moment when I was drifting. Fame had just begun. My world was shifting. I didn't even know. Yet what I'd have to sacrifice to keep moving forward. And then ... there she was, grounded, bright, light. His voice warmed with memory. But not fake light. Not the kind you put on for cameras. She didn't force joy, she was joy, but she had depth. She could cry and laugh in the same breath. She was real, curious, tender. He paused, then added, She reminded me of something I was starting to forget. Vanessa leaned in again. Gently? What was that? Keanu looked down, then raised his eyes with quiet intensity. That it was still safe to smile. The room remained completely still. After the losses I'd faced, I started building walls, he said. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly, I didn't even notice it happening, but I was growing harder. Less open, people didn't always see it. Because I kept smiling, I kept showing up. But inside ... I was shutting down. He took a deep breath. And then she'd walk in a room and it all felt light again. Keanu Reeves sat still for a moment, eyes fixed on the floor like he was listening to a memory more than to Vanessa. Then he breathed in and said, And then I met her ... She wasn't loud or chaotic. She was like a small earthquake, just strong. Enough to shake the dust off of me. There was a tenderness in his voice, something delicate and rare. Vanessa leaned in slightly, visibly touched. Do you think that was fate? She asked, her voice gentle. Keanu considered it for a long beat. No ... It felt like something even deeper. Fate is about direction. This was grace. Like the universe didn't want to change where I was headed. It just didn't want me to forget why I started walking in the first place. He paused, choosing each word with care, as if they were fragile. Sometimes The gift isn't the person themselves. Sometimes the gift is what they remind you of, that your heart still knows how to feel, that you're still capable of softness even after everything life tries to harden. Vanessa's voice was almost a whisper. Do you think she knew she had that effect on you? Keanu smiled faintly, his gaze drifting off. I think she did. Maybe not fully, but she could sense it. She had this way of seeing people not the version they pretend to be, but the parts they're scared to show. After I lost Jennifer and our baby, everything just went dark. Not outside, but inside me. There were days I didn't speak. Days I didn't even want to move. Vanessa's expression softened, her eyes glistening. But then I thought of her. Keanu continued, her laugh, her energy, her silly impressions, and something inside me flickered. Not because I needed her to heal me, but because she reminded me I hadn't always been broken. He paused again, letting the silence breathe. She became something grid, not love lost. Something lighter. Like a reminder that light still existed even if it wasn't always with you. Vanessa blinked, holding back tears. Some people, Keanu said quietly, they show up in your life not to stay, but to stand beside your soul when it needs a witness. She wasn't just a moment I missed. She was a moment I was meant to hold. A gift not to grieve, but to protect. Vanessa swallowed, visibly moved. Do you think she knew you saw her that way? He nodded gently. I hope so, I tried to tell her. Not with words, but in the way I stayed kind. In the way I didn't let life harden me completely. That was my thank you. The air shifted. The audience leaned in, but Vanessa didn't interrupt. She knew this was a sacred space. Keanu leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. I remember the day clearly, he said. We were filming a simple driving scene. Nothing emotional, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I had gotten a quiet call that morning. My sister didn't want to alarm me, but Jennifer had gone to the hospital. Complications with the pregnancy. He closed his eyes for a second. I flew out after that shoot. 2 days later, we lost Ava. She was stillborn, and 3 weeks after that, Jennifer was gone too, car accident. There were no gasps, just silent ache in every heart in the room. I broke apart, he said, and I didn't want the world to know. I didn't want the press or pity, or the kind of spotlight that burns instead of lights. I just wanted to disappear. And honestly, I almost did. He explained how he stopped responding to calls. How he would show up on sets, surrounded by lights and cameras, but feel absolutely nothing. A ghost in his own life, Vanessa whispered. And Sandra? He nodded. She didn't know everything, but she felt it. She sent me a handwritten letter. I still have it. He took a breath, repeating the words from memory. It said, don't let the silence steal your softness. The world still needs your kindness. His voice cracked just slightly. It was the first time I cried in weeks. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was holy. Then Keanu leaned forward again. There was a night late. I wasn't the kind of person who prayed, but I did. I said out loud, God, if there's anything left in me worth saving, send me a sign. He looked straight at Vanessa now, and the next day, she walked in. He explained how they bumped into each other on a studio lot. She was just there for a reading, not part of his life anymore. But she hugged him just a little longer than normal and said, Hey, I missed you. He smiled faintly. I didn't feel healed, but I didn't feel alone anymore. Vanessa wiped at her eyes, her voice unsteady. Do you think she was the sign? I do, Keanu replied. Not to stay. Not to rescue. Just to remind me that softness still existed in the world. That I hadn't been abandoned entirely. He looked out toward the audience, not to impress, but to reach. People think miracles are loud, that divine things come with lightning and fire, but sometimes it's just someone smiling at you when you forgot how to smile back. His voice softened even more. I never told her what she gave me. Not really, I didn't have to. That's the thing about grace, it doesn't ask to be noticed. It just arrives quietly and saves whatever's left. The entire room felt different now. The crew, The camera operators, even those who usually stayed distant, were changed. Something invisible had passed through them all. Keanu folded his hands and leaned back again. I'm not religious. Not really, but I believe in timing, in the sacred, that sometimes people walk into your life to help you remember you're still human. He looked directly into the camera. She didn't walk in to stay. She walked in so I could find what I thought I lost forever, and then he was silent. Keanu paused for a moment, his gaze drifting as if following a memory only he could see. And then, he said quietly, I met her. She came into my life like a quiet earthquake, not destructive, but just powerful enough to shake the dust off everything I thought was settled. Vanessa smiled gently, visibly moved. Do you think it was fate? She asked. Keanu tilted his head slightly, thoughtful. No, I think it was something deeper than fate. Fate has direction. But this felt more like grace, like the universe. Placing someone gently in your path, not to change your course, but to remind you why you were on it. He drew in a slow breath, choosing each word with care. Sometimes the gift isn't in the relationship itself. Sometimes it's simply in being reminded that you're still capable of feeling, that your heart still beats with softness, that there's still a place inside you that hasn't hardened. Vanessa leaned in, her voice a whisper. Did she? No? Did she know she had that effect on you? Keanu smiled faintly, eyes flickering toward some far-off point. I think she did, maybe not fully, but she sensed it. She always had this quiet gift. She saw people. Not the version they showed the world, but the version they were afraid to reveal. He took a long pause, the silence heavy with memory. After Jennifer and Ava passed, everything inside me went dark, not just around me, but in me. There were days I didn't speak, days I couldn't move. I remember wondering if I'd ever feel anything again. Vanessa's face softened. Then Keanu continued, voice low. But I thought of her laugh, her energy, her ridiculous impressions. And something in me shifted, not because I needed her to fix me, but because she reminded me of who I once was, the part of me that still wanted to live. He paused again, visibly carrying the weight of grief and healing. She became this sort of spiritual landmark in my life, not a symbol of love lost, but of light remembered, of the kindness and softness I thought I'd buried. Vanessa blinked back emotion. Keanu went on. Some people come into your life not to stay, but to stand beside you when your soul is gasping for a witness. And that's not something I mourn, that's something I carry. Do you think she knew you saw her that way? Vanessa asked. Keanu looked down, then slowly nodded. I hope so. I think I told her in the ways that don't require words, in how I stayed soft, even when everything inside me wanted to turn cold. Vanessa didn't speak, sensing the sacredness of the moment. Keanu's voice softened even more. I remember the day everything changed. We had just finished filming a simple driving scene, but I was shaking. I couldn't stop. Earlier that morning, I got a call my partner Jennifer had been rushed to the hospital. Complications with the pregnancy. He took a moment to steady his voice. I flew out the moment I wrapped the scene. 2 days later, Ava was born still. 3 weeks after that, Jennifer died in a car crash. Vanessa covered her mouth, silent. I didn't speak about it. I didn't want pity or headlines. I wanted to vanish, and I nearly did. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. I stopped answering calls. I didn't leave the house for days. I was supposed to be on set, surrounded by lights and people, but I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. Vanessa whispered, And Sandra? Keanu nodded slowly. She didn't know all the details, but she felt something. She sent me a letter handwritten. It just said, Don't let the silence steal your softness. The world still needs your kindness. That was the first time I cried. In weeks. He leaned forward, again looking inward. One night I said a prayer. Not something I usually did. I just whispered into the dark. If there's anything in me left worth saving, send me a sign. His voice broke gently. The next day she walked in. She wasn't supposed to be there, he said. Just happened to be doing. A table read on a nearby set. We bumped into each other. She hugged me a little too long. And then she said, "Hey, I missed you." He closed his eyes briefly, reliving the warmth of that moment. I didn't feel fixed, but I didn't feel alone either. Vanessa's voice trembled. "Do you think she was the sign?" Keanu's eyes were steady. "Yes, not to save me, not to stay, but to remind me that there was still something soft and sacred in this world, that I hadn't been completely abandoned." He turned to the audience, his words like a quiet sermon. People think divine intervention is loud and dramatic, but sometimes it's just a smile. Sometimes it's a letter. Sometimes it's someone who shows up without knowing your pain but still touches it. He sat back for a moment, composed. I never told her exactly what she did for me. I didn't need to. That's the grace of it. It doesn't demand recognition. It just shows up and saves what's left. The entire studio was still. Even the crew behind the cameras had tears in their eyes. Keanu folded his hands in his lap. "I'm not religious in the traditional sense," he said softly, "but I believe in timing, in sacred encounters, in God sending people to us when we're forgetting we're still human." Then, turning slightly toward Vanessa, he added, "She didn't walk in to stay. She came so I could see what I'd lost. She reminded me of what was still alive inside me." The silence in the room wasn't uncomfortable, it was reverent. Keanu's voice dropped lower. "People think love is about forever, but sometimes love is just someone showing up when you need them most with no expectations, no demands." Vanessa nodded, barely whispering, "And Sandra showed up," he smiled gently. "She did, not to fix me, not to stay, but to reflect. Back to me, the version of myself I'd forgotten. Before the grief, before the silence." He took a deep breath. "I've come to believe people are sent to us as mirrors, to show us something sacred that's still within, and no, that kind of connection doesn't truly end. Because even if the person leaves, what they awaken in you, that stays." Vanessa wiped a tear. "So what do you hope people take from this?" Keanu looked into the lens. "That all stories end in love. But that doesn't mean they aren't. Love stories. That even if something doesn't become everything, it can still be something holy, something true." The audience remained silent, deeply moved. Keanu leaned back, eyes tender. "We wait for the big love, the forever kind, but sometimes the most important love is the one that passes through gently and leaves us better. Then it found us." Vanessa's voice was barely audible. "That's beautiful." Keanu smiled, almost a whisper now. "Some people don't stay, but the message they leave behind that lasts forever."